Hi everyone, welcome to Serious Sunday. I'm Luke, and how are you doing today? So this week, I'd like to talk just a tiny bit more about speedruns. I know I've been talking about it an awful lot the last couple of times that we've done videos here, including the most recent Thursdev, so some of you might be getting sick of hearing about speedruns, but there you go. It's just this thing that sort of happens to me every year right around the time of AGDQ and SGDQ. I've got a lot to say about it. Mostly because I spend most of my free time when these events are going on watching those as opposed to playing video games myself. That's just kind of the way that I work. I have been playing an awful lot of Overwatch, but I realized that we'd also been doing a whole lot of Overwatch videos recently, so I figured you guys could use a little bit of break from that and from sort of the normal video game design theory type talks to talk a little bit more about something that's on the hobbyist level of video games. So we're going to get back into all of that pretty soon, but I've got one final thing that I'd like to just kind of address, and it's an interesting one this time through. So I was watching the Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time speedrun that had been done, I want to say yesterday, as of this recording, so Friday night, where the run was labeled as a any percent glitchless run. Glitchless being sort of the big topic of discussion in this particular day. I won't go as far as to say that people were necessarily calling foul on it, because when we're talking about Twitch chat, it's really hard to tell whether people are taking things seriously or not. I want to say maybe one or two people have actual legitimate, upsetness about certain things, and then basically everybody else just jumps on the bandwagon because that's what they do in Twitch chat. That's just the way that it all works, for better or worse, usually for worse. But anyway, this glitchless run, quote unquote, did make use of quite a few big exploits as far as the game is concerned. And so there was a lot of talk, not only on Twitch chat, but also from the commentators, the people on the couch during the game, about how the things that were being done in the game, despite the fact that they led to very large sequence breaks and the ability to completely ignore certain parts, certain mechanics of the game, like something that allowed Link to essentially breathe underwater or breathe underwater much longer than he should be able to do, and so on and so forth, led people to say that the game, the things that they were doing were moving beyond the realm of mere exploits and into the territory of glitches. And so I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about that weird little sort of middle ground, the fuzzy border between what is an exploit and what is a glitch. I don't know if I'm going to necessarily be able to convince anybody of a hard line between the two of them, but there are certain factors that lead into how you want to classify one of these things. Now, I got my start in the games industry doing QA, so I had to kind of think about these sorts of things quite a bit because I was looking for them actively while I was playing the games that I worked on. When you are doing QA and when you're playing a game and trying to find potential problems with the game, you look for not only things that are just fundamentally broken about the game, crashes and statistics behaving badly and things like that, but you also want to look, generally speaking, for ways that the game functions normally that can still be used in order to play the game quote-unquote incorrectly, or to go beyond what the game really intends you to do. I was the master in the Arena Shaolin Showdown game that I worked on when I was first doing QA for Konami way back in the day, of getting outside of the level. There was one of the characters who had a sort of double high jump ability when you used a certain Shengang Wu that allowed you to basically jump over the bounds of the levels and get outside the front of the level, so you would be walking below where everybody else could get to. And it was not overly useful, to be honest, but This was not necessarily something that was really a bug in the code so much as just an exploit, a way to get over a wall, right? Was this something that needed to come out of the game? Absolutely. You don't want the player to be able to get themselves into a position where they're unable to get back into the game, where they're stuck on the sort of the outside looking in, so to speak. So yeah, these things are, in the strictest terms, as far as QA is concerned, as much of a bug as any given programming bug. But the difference is that it uses the game's fundamental principles. It works completely within the mechanics of the game to accomplish something that the game never intended. And that's sort of one of the main sort of touchstones of what makes a particular trick used in speedrunning a exploit as opposed to a glitch. There are some things that are very obvious glitches when you're playing these games. Things like zips that you sort of force yourself into the geometry of the game and then it spits you out somewhere else because it doesn't want you to be inside the geometry. It doesn't necessarily want to insta-gib you like some games used to back in the day. It wants you to still be able to play the game and move around sort of freely, but in order to do that, it needs to put you outside of whatever part of the ground or the walls or the ceiling that you happen to get yourself wedged into. So sometimes it ends up putting you somewhere that you shouldn't go, like the infamous bucket trick in Skyrim. But that's basically a glitch. That's not really an exploit. The game never really meant for you to wedge yourself into a wall and therefore spit you out somewhere else. If it did, then that's a weird game. But usually that would probably be something that the game would explain that you need to do at some point, theoretically. Whereas in some cases the game would, for example, allow you to switch between certain items which would replenish your stamina when you did it, or something along those lines, performing a certain action would allow your stamina to raise even though you were still doing something that should be draining stamina, so something along those lines. That is, in many cases could be considered a sloppy implementation of a mechanic. Sloppy is kind of unfair, but a mistaken implementation of a mechanic, but it's not necessarily a bug because the player, for whatever reason, was deigned that they should be able to continue gaining stats of some sort, or it just is asked not to look at a specific stat while it is happening. I don't honestly know. There are some infinite running bugs in these games, so that's the first thing that popped into mind since we were talking about the bucket glitch previously. But things in Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, like the ability to sort of do a late jump and then do a sword slash that then ends up allowing you to grab onto a ledge that's far, far further than you would normally be able to get to from a normal jump. That sort of thing. It's absolutely just a regular exploit. Because, yes, you can kind of late jump, and yes, when you do a sword slash, it does sort of propel you forward a little bit. And if you have the means by which you can cancel that action and instead grab onto the ledge that you happen to be slashing in front of, then hey, by all means, that is absolutely something that you can do. It's unintended. It allows for extremely large sequence breaks and allows the player to do things that the game absolutely does not intend for them to be able to do. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a glitch or a bug. That's the hard thing about really classifying things like this. Because, yes, it is unintended behavior. By that definition, if unintended behavior is a bug, then yes, that's a bug. But how do we define a bug specifically? Well, a bug is, something that causes the game to run in an unintended manner through mistakes in programming or something along those lines. Whereas an exploit is something that uses that, well, by definition, the word exploit, it exploits the mechanics of the game to do something that is unintended. And it is a fine line, right? Like, there are certain things where absolutely it could be argued that the mechanic should not allow you to do X because it is meant for you to have a complete follow through in that, and that there's a button that causes that to cancel is not necessarily something that was originally intended. So yes, that's a bug, not an exploit or something along those lines. You can argue that point, but at the end of the day, the big thing about a Zelda Glitchless run, for example, in this case, Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, is that in a glitched run, you've got a lot more going on than just making ridiculous jumps and knowing the exact distance that the hookshot can go and things like that. Instead, you'd be like clipping outside of the walls so that you're completely out of bounds, and then floating around behind doors so that you can go through them without needing a key or something along those lines, you know? Or wrong warps. I mean, good gravy. Wrong warps are crazy. Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time absolutely has one. The game can be run extremely quickly, which, you know, this version of the game, the any % glitchless run, doesn't use, because those are essentially outside of the purview of what the game is supposed to allow the player to do. You have to do some crazy tricks in order to push yourself through the wall, once again, or to fool the game into thinking that the exit that you're going through is supposed to send you somewhere that it doesn't. So yeah, I don't know. It's not like it's some kind of big deal that really needs to be addressed, but there is a significant difference between what makes a particular trick in a game, or what makes a particular unintended consequence of actions in a game an exploit or a bug. And I'd like to posit that, especially in the context of speedrunning, you can call a game a glitchless run while still doing things that are strange and causing the game to sequence break. If you look at a game like Super Metroid, there are some amazing things that are done that are absolutely not supposed to be happening, like the mock ball in general, which is a very useful technique that allows Samus to move at regular running speed in ball form without slowing down, basically, to switch into the ball form, allowing her to skip through especially certain sections where there would be like doors closing that when you're walking at normal height you would absolutely not be able to get underneath, and things like that. That in some cases could be completely argued as being a bug or a glitch in the game, because yeah, you're not supposed to be able to move at that speed, but it doesn't look like a bug, so people don't necessarily identify it as a glitch or a bug. But it's as much an exploit as it is a bug in that case, you know, because through certain movements, through jumping and pressing your keys at a certain rate or a certain sort of timing, you're able to switch into the morph ball form and continue moving at maximum speed. That's not, you know, that's not so much a glitch as it is absolutely people just finding the ways that the game allows them to do things that otherwise it kind of tries to stop you from doing, and allows you to do it. So yeah, let's I guess ultimately what I want to say is, you know, yeah, it's glitchless. It's not breaking through walls, and it's not doing wrong warps, and it's not doing anything that is fundamentally outside of what the game should allow you to do, or can possibly allow you to do, without really, you know, punching through the mechanics of the game. It's doing superhuman feats, so to speak, but it's not doing things that in absolutely no way was the game intending to allow the player to do that. I don't know. It's a fuzzy zone, right? Like, there are some exploits that are absolutely, acceptable by, insofar as like if a bad programming or something like that caused a certain expensive item to be free to purchase or something like that. I don't know if there's a real in-game example that it exists like that, but if the player was allowed to buy infinite copies of that particular item and then sell it back for an actual profit, then yeah, that's totally an exploit. That's a money exploit. I've seen that happen in the context of actual bug testing that I've done in the past, but things like that are completely exploits. They're not, they're not a bug. Well, they're something that you would log in a bug tracker, but they're not a glitch. They're not a result of the programming getting confused because the player did a certain thing, if that makes sense. And I don't know if it necessarily does, but those are my thoughts on it. You're absolutely free to believe one way or the other. Nothing I say is necessarily really going to change your mind on that particular type of thing, but I hope that you'll sort of keep that in mind when you're necessarily criticizing the way that a certain run is run. For example, I mean the speedrunning community around these games are having massive debates about whether something is an exploit or a bug most of the time. So if you really want to call something a bug or a glitch and you want to get it out of that run, join that community and talk to the people about it and put your case forward, right? If you can argue that it is not something that should reasonably be expectable within the general playthrough of a game at maximum possible sort of human input level or sort of human interaction with the game without, obvious things like a bomb pushing you through a wall, that sort of thing, then yeah, you might be able to make a case against that. But for now, let's just enjoy the runs, I guess. Anyway, that's it for me. Thank you very much. I hope that you at least found this interesting, if not informative, and I also hope that you will consider coming back and watching some more of our videos. Thanks very much, as always, for coming by. I hope to see you guys around for any number of the rest of our videos. If you haven't seen the other speedrunning videos that I've done, I'll link them down below. And yeah, SGDQ, as of the airing of this video, is over, and all of the VODs are now viewable. So if you missed any of them, I absolutely suggest checking out that Ocarina of Time video. And the Super Metroid race, by the way, was fantastic. So enjoyed that as well. There's some big excitement right around the middle, but I'll leave that up for you to see. Anyway, thanks very much. I'll talk to you again soon. Take care.
We probably have some time for donations, actually.
We actually have a question in a donation, so I'll let this be that time to work with that. That guy, 183, donated $15 to ask question for the Zelda Ocarina of Time speedrunners. I've noticed there have been some exploits being used. What qualifies this run as a glitchless any percent versus a glitched any percent?
Right, so we explained this earlier, and it's sort of that this run has this game has such a spectrum of things that you can and can't do. And it's really impossible to have like a one-line set definition of what is or isn't a glitch. And so the runners of this category just sort of got together and drew a line and said everything on this side is a glitch, everything on that side isn't. And if you place everything on the spectrum, there's generally a pretty good line where things of greater magnitude are glitches and things that are pretty simple aren't. And there's a paste bin on the FAQ page of my channel that lists all the things that you can and can't do in this run, if you're curious.
One way of looking at it is to think about the mechanics and try and imagine what mechanics the developers of the game intended you to use. So you've seen us do damage boosts. The developers intended for bombs to boost you through the air. What they didn't intend is things like mega side hops, where we use our shield and some very precise backflip timing or side hop timing to fly backwards through the air. All right, they didn't want that to happen.
Yeah, so generally, if you create a new mechanic, it's a glitch. If you use a mechanic that's a part of the game normally to do something that's unintended, then it's an exploit.
And that question specifically asked the difference between like glitchless any percent and regular glitched any percent. If you haven't seen Glitched Any %, go check that out, and you will see just how powerful glitches can be and what sort of things have been banned.